Welcome to the Married People Podcast, where we help you make marriage real, fun, and simple. Each week, we have honest conversations about one simple thing that can make your marriage better. Because when your marriage is better, everything's better. I'm CJ, and here today we have our resident newlywed, Afton.
Hi.
And we have our 22-year marriage veteran. He's an author, speaker, and director of marriedpeople.org, Ted Lowe.
Hey, everybody.
And today on the Married People Podcast, we're going to look at the question, does your marriage matter to others? Now, a lot of us probably haven't thought too much about that question, does your marriage matter to others? But when you reverse that question, Ted, I think you can instantly feel the heaviness of it. So if you ask, hey, do other people's marriages matter and impact me? And I think the instant answer for me, at least, is, well, yes. And the first thing that comes to mind would be like my parents' marriage or something like that. So when we flip it back around, does your marriage matter to others? Let me just go ahead and ask you, now that I've kind of set it up that way. Ted, does your marriage matter to others? And why are we talking about that today?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think for a lot of times we think, we don't think more highly of ourselves than maybe we should. And we think, well, our marriage is not impacting anybody else. It's just the two of us. Mm-hmm. Afton, would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%.
How come?
Because my marriage is nobody else's business.
Yeah, we feel like it's nobody else's business, right? So why does it matter?
Yeah, I think, hey, yeah, just like Afton said, my marriage is my business. It happens in my house, and I don't think if we're going through something or whether things are good or whether things are kind of rough, it's not really impacting anything other than what people are talking about it, the gossip or whatever.
Right. Well, but I do think about other people's marriages.
Yeah.
I think about my parents' marriage or other people I've witnessed or friends that I see. I'm like, oh, what's going on in their marriage? Should I be doing that? Should I not be doing that? Is that okay? Why do they function that way? Am I supposed to function that way?
Right, yeah.
So you're kind of picking up on that. When we think about a divorce, even, let's not to dive in too heavy all at once, but and when we think
Welcome to the Married People Podcast.
We're real fun and simple.
Right.
But it's that thing, and you start watching the trickle effects of a divorce. You start realizing that impact,
Yeah, but I think when we think of divorce, yeah, I think that does have ripple effects.
Right.
But I think to a lesser extent, we think of our personal marriage ups and downs, our personal things we're going through. We feel like those have less weight to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, if we went through a divorce, that would impact some things, but maybe not, the little things we're going through.
But when you see like friends or parents or aunts or uncles or whatever, when you see them get divorced, doesn't it make you kind of paranoid?
Yeah.
I do. If I see, when I see people that I knew together as a married couple, and then something happens and they got divorced, it makes me anxious and paranoid about everything happening in my marriage. What are we supposed to do to make sure that doesn't happen to us?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think we think about how it impacts our kids, and I want us to go back to that in just a minute. But to your point, Afton, they call it social contagion. And that there's this, I know, that sounds kind of gross. So this is,
warning.
It's and it's defined as the spread of information, attitudes, behaviors through friends, families, and social networks.
So where did that come from?
This actually came from a study. It was a joint study with Brown University, Yale University, and the University of California in San Diego. And what they found is couples are 75% more likely to divorce if one of their friends or close family members have divorced. 75%.
So if their parents are divorced or they have close friends
this is just a study on friends.
Okay. But
This is
friends.
just friends and close family.
Close.
This is not hey, my parents divorced. This is friends and close family.
Okay. I'm okay with that because it's really annoying to me when people are like I remember when I was dating, a lot of people would be like, well, you need to look at his parents. Are his parents still together? And if they're not, you probably need to reevaluate if that's the person you should be dating because they came from a quote unquote broken family. And I always hated people telling me that.
Right.
Because I felt that poor person that, they didn't choose to come from that situation. And just because their parents got divorced doesn't mean they also see that as an okay option when things get hard. You know what I mean? Because I don't know. I just felt like it was kind of a not okay thing to say to people.
I do. And I think the thing, I always hesitate doing stats when it comes to marriage because, marriage is not a stat. Get ready, Afton. This is really cheesy what I'm about to say.
I'm ready.
Marriage is not a stat. It's a story. Isn't that
Oh,
that
I
cute?
feel so fuzzy.
It's so fuzzy. But if you do think about that, when you say to somebody that you've got this % chance of something happening to you, it doesn't really equate, especially even like the divorce rate, and you say 50% or 40% or whatever study you follow. It's like, wait a minute, there's so many variables that come into this. You can't tell a young, hopeful couple or a millennial couple, hey, you've got a 50% chance of this making it, because, I don't think God works like that. I don't think marriage, but we start getting really paranoid about these things. At the same time, I think what these stats do is kind of raise a red flag to go, hey, let's think about this. And here's the crazier part. It says 33% are more likely to divorce 2 degrees away. So if a friend of a friend divorces, it increases our chance of divorce 33 more %. And again, I don't want us to get all paranoid about it, but you go, okay, let's look at this. Hey, our marriage and the friends around us, marriage and a close family, they matter.
All right, Ted. So what I hear you saying, based on these stats, the 75%, the 33%, all that kind of a thing, is my marriage does matter to others. But while we've kind of been harping on the negative side of that,
Right.
like there's a flip side to that too, right?
That's exactly right. And I think that's, hopefully we always are going to do this on this podcast to say, yeah, it's easy to harp on the negative, but what's the positive? And the positive of this is these same studies are showing the positive side of that. And says one of the things they said, and this is a quote, it says, a stronger supportive friendship network protects a couple's marriage by making it easier for individuals to weather the inevitable marital stresses.
Can you say that again?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's kind of a brainful.
Well, when we put people around our marriage, it actually makes it easier for us to go through the tough times.
Okay.
It's like, and we have these people around, and you think about it, man, when things go tough, when things are hard, that's when these friends, I know when I had lost a family member suddenly, he was really young, and I was devastated, and the funeral was 2 hours away. And I remember being at the funeral home and looking and seeing my small group walk in, and I thought, I didn't need the guy that speaks at church. I didn't want my senior pastor at that point. I wanted the people that were around us and surrounding us. And when I saw that, I just thought, wow, this is what church is, or this is what friendships are. And they didn't say anything. They didn't have anything pithy, or they didn't try to fix it. They were just there. And that's what it's saying. When studies are showing, too, we're living more and more and more in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
We click the garage door, we go inside, we drop it down, and nobody's knowing what's going on.
We've talked about that
doors.
before.
Right. And so how do we put people around our marriage? How do we become those people? How can we, again, this is very important for us to realize the couples around us matter to our marriage, but our marriage does also matter to others. So how do we pour into other ones?
Probably, I would say you put a lot of 2 lattes on your Instagram and talk about how great your spouse is all the time. And then other people will see it and be like, oh man, CJ has such a great marriage. Mine's not that great. We never have lattes.
I don't even know how to. I don't know where to take that.
Because that's what I heard when you said social contagion. My mind went to social media because
Sure.
I feel like people put the light of their marriage on social media, and then you're looking at what you think is a perfect marriage through this filter, a literal filter, and then you are like, well, ours doesn't match up.
Okay, I'm going to be super judgy for a second.
Okay.
Sometimes I feel like the couples that post the most lovey-dovey stuff on social media have the I don't
Say it, CJ. Say it.
Yeah, go ahead.
are hiding something.
Yeah.
That is super judgy.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Right.
But sometimes, and
But
that's probably
might sometimes be true.
That's probably on me because I'm like, I feel convicted or something. I don't know. So, but
I think that's where the balance is, because it's be a light to other people's marriages. But when I see people post about how great their marriage is and how great their spouse is and how they do everything for them all the time and they're perfect and wonderful, I feel annoyed and not encouraged.
Yeah, because it's artificial, right? It's artificial. What is it people say? It's their highlight reel. It's the Facebook face that we put ahead. This is absolutely the opposite of that. It's real relationship. It's real friendship. In fact, we're going to have somebody come and talk in a couple of weeks about how social media impacts marriage, because after you're straight on as we see this stuff and we think, what am I doing wrong? Why don't I get to vacation there? Why can't put my feet, in front of the ocean, which I think those should be banned by the government. But I think you're right. And this is the opposite of this. This is the difference between, when you're in school and the popular kid, you get to walk down the hall with the popular kid, or you're walking down and doing life with your buddy that does life, that's real with you, that you can talk to, that you can share with. What this is just saying is those people, the people that are close to us, that mean the most to us. I mean, I think we're kind of annoyed and kind of maybe unsure by social media, but when our real tight network that we know, even if they're posting crazy stuff, we know the real stuff, it's when those things start feeling shaky, or when we see the strength of it that matters to our marriage and that we matter to other people. So
for me, I do feel like the social media posts and the lattes and the feet in the sand, those aren't actually what's encouraging me, but to my marriage. But I feel like when I'm just hanging out with my friends, my girlfriends, and we're swapping stories about what's been going on in our lives, or how
the good and the bad,
and how they handled a situation where they were in an argument or we're having a great time and whatever, that's where I'm that's when I say me too, and I feel like these people understand me, and now I'm encouraged because I don't feel like I'm alone in whatever we're going through.
That's a real life situation of their marriage is mattering to you and impacting you.
Right.
So which kind of almost, I guess, it brings us back to that question, how does my marriage impact others? So
yeah, well, I tell you what, we had Shanti Philhan on a couple of episodes ago, and she really talked about the importance of kindness, and that somewhere we were taught that if we vent, that releases the pressure. And she said, actually, brain research, neuroscience is actually showing that when we vent in an unkind way, it actually sears that on our brain. And so I think if we and it just speaks to this, who are you putting around you? And what are they speaking in your mirror? It's nobody divorces in isolation, right? They find a group of people they put around them to say, yeah, you do deserve better. Or, yeah, you do deserve out of that. And I think that speaks to this whole social contagion thing, negatively and positively, to go, wow, when I sit down with a group of, as you said, girlfriends, or CJs, we sit down with buddies, that we want to sit down with people that, yeah, we can be real with, but they're for our marriage, that they care more about us than us liking them. Right? Because, and that's what's difficult. We talk a lot about, at our church at least, we talk about, it's so important, to get into a small group, the circles are more important than rows. And it's this idea of who is around your marriage that is for your marriage, that's speaking into it.
I'm just going to be really transparent. We are not in a small group because I'm pretty terrified of adult small groups. I've been in single small groups before. Before we got married, I was in a couple single small groups, and it's just, unless you find those people that you really genuinely connect with, it can feel so awkward. And so we haven't prioritized to do that, but I know CJ's done it and it's been really successul for you.
Yeah, I mean, we've had to push through that awkward, we're just a bunch of married couples that go to the same church and now we're trying to be friends phase. And once you get past that, though, and we're talking about marriages mattering, does mine matter to them? I can absolutely say that the couples we have in our small group, their marriages matter to me. And I think one of the huge value adds, going back to what you were saying, Ted, about who you're surrounding yourself with, I could surround myself with guys who only hear my stories and will always agree with my side of things.
Well,
yeah.
That's why you do that.
But the value of that small group is that we're a small group of married couples, and each couple knows Terry and me. They know both of us. And so when I share a story, one of them can be like, I don't think I think you're kind of, going at that from a different angle, because I've never seen that, or I don't think Terry's like that. Or think about it this way, because I know Terry's like this or that. You have someone who's who's gauging the whole relationship and not just one side. And that's where I think the huge value is in the married couple small group.
And I've actually heard too, from some other friends that are in small groups like that it's really helpful for your marriage to be in a small group, because you're learning and discussing the same things together. You're generally when you're, you do apart small groups, or you are learning something over here, or you listen to this podcast and they don't listen to that podcast, then you tend to your brains are like going in a different direction. But being in a couple's small group, you're learning and talking and discussing about something, and you're kind of growing in the same way,
Right.
or you're like, on the
Yeah.
same track, and so it's easier to have conversation to like bring you together.
And your marriage almost has like a thermometer or a barometer at that point. Because when I'm on the same path, like you're talking about with 3 or 4 other couples, now all of a sudden, if our marriage starts lagging behind a little bit, we'll feel that. If we're in isolation, you don't sometimes feel all that bickering, or you don't feel all that, or whatever. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because
Yeah.
this is just normal. But all of a sudden, if I start bringing that to a group of people
Yeah.
who are pouring into my marriage, because then it starts to rub the wrong way if none of them are bickering the same way we might. You know what I mean?
I do. And Afton, I think you make a really good point. Small groups can be awkward, or they can be scary, and we have to keep looking. That's going to look different for everybody. For some people, it's a couple small group. For you, it may be 3 close friends. Our small group, what we had to do is guys had to go one way, and the ladies had to go another, because we just had a couple of the ladies in our group who, we've been trying to do this thing for like a year, and they just wouldn't open up. And so when we split our groups into men and women, Nancy comes home and she says, after their group, she goes, I don't think we should ever get back together as groups. She says,
We are never, ever, ever.
this is the Taylor Swift model of small groups. But she said this lady who had not shared for a year, all of a sudden she opens up. And so kind of the joke, we took a summer break and we got back together, and the leader of our group said, well, here's the deal, guys. I don't think the ladies are going to let us come back together. We can do some social outings and things, but we're going to stay put. And I've watched in my small group of guys, we meet on Monday mornings, 8 o'clock, and I watch these guys sharing things that I know for a fact that they would not have shared in mixed company. They just wouldn't. So I think it's,
Find what fits.
Find what
Yeah.
fits for you. Absolutely.
So, Ted, we're talking a whole lot about small groups and friends and married couples and all that kind of a thing, and how our marriages matter to them and their marriages matter to us. But if we start really, really drilling down, who does our marriage matter to the most? If we're getting hyper-focused here.
Yeah, that's a great question. One quick note on this thing. When I start, we're sitting here recording at my house, right? And we're sitting in the cul-de-sac, and I think about how our marriages matter. If you're a believer, how your marriage matters to non-believers or people in your neighborhood or people that are around you. Our marriages are supposed to represent Christ in the church. So our marriages are supposed to look so great that they draw people to the church and they draw people to Christ. And so when they see a great marriage, that's the thing that puts us on the same playing field. People want a great marriage where they're believers or not. And so I think that's hugely important. And then there's most important, I would say, depending on how you look at it, are these little people, or at my house now they have teenagers, the bigger people. It's these people that live inside our home the most. Our kids. We can't talk about this and the impact of our marriage and not talk about, for those of us who have children, how important that marriage matters. Or anybody that you have influence that have a child. Maybe you're not married, but you have a small group. You have a small group at church, or you have a niece or nephew, or you have stepchildren, or whatever that is. Your marriage absolutely matters to kids and teenagers the most. Looked at this study the other day from Notre Dame, and here's one of the quotes. It says, kids pay close attention to their parents' emotions for information about how safe they are in their family. Let me say it one more time. It says, kids pay close attention to their parents' emotion for information about how safe they are in their family. And so when the parent's marriage is destructive, the collateral damage to this can absolutely last a lifetime. So kids are kind of watching mom and dad, or they're watching marriages to see how safe that they actually feel. And it's hugely impactful on a child in every sense of the word.
I think it's also equally important for kids to see an authentic marriage, because it's easy to say like your marriage is going to impact your kids the most, but kids will also pick up if there's tension and you're not talking about it because you're waiting for them to go to bed so you can scream at each other.
Afton, you make a great point there. And we're not talking about Afton smiling and nodding her
Yes,
head.
I did.
Yes.
Congratulations,
Thank you
Afton.
for saying
You
so.
made a great point.
Finally.
I get it, but it's not about being fake. It's not fake it till you make it. It is about being authentic. In fact, one of the things, conflict does not have to be a negative thing for a kid. In fact, it can be a super, super positive thing for a kid. This same study came out and it said when kids witness a fight and they see the parents resolving it, they're actually happier than before they saw it. And it said it reassures kids that parents can work things out. And they said, we know this by the feelings that they show, by what they say in their behavior. They said this, because they run off and play, that constructive conflict is associated with better outcomes over time. So all of a sudden, we're all going to have conflict, right? Mm-hmm. Every one of us is going to have conflict. And they see mom and dad do this, or mom and stepdad, step down by mom, or any marriage in their life. They see that done well. And all of a sudden, they feel secure because they feel conflict and they feel turmoil and all this stuff inside them. Go, wow, this anxiety in me or this fear that when things aren't great, this could be worked out. When we love each other in a great way, when we talk about this in the right way, when we're truthful, when we're honest and we're authentic, it just makes kids feel safe.
Yeah. Well, Ted, so we've talked about friends, we've talked about the impact our marriage has and how our marriage matters to our kids, both positively and negatively. So what are we supposed to do with that? Are we just supposed to be like, your marriage matters to your kids, so good luck, or whatever? And what do we do with that now?
Yeah. I mean, what do we say? We want this podcast to help people make their marriage more real, more fun, more simple. And I think sometimes these simple truths, these things that we bring to the light that people maybe have never thought about the power of, I think that in and of itself is a form of application to go, okay, this makes sense, that the way I treat my wife, the way I treat my husband, that matters to people around us. Because here's the truth of this, make this really simple, is the health of your marriage is contagious. The health of our marriage, it is contagious, and it matters to the people we love the most. And so we just want to give people one simple thing to do. And so after talking about all this and talking about stats from Notre Dame and different things like that, what do we want people to do? This is it. You ready? This is very complicated, Afton. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. With your spouse in earshot, say something positive about them. In other words, say something great about your spouse in front of your spouse, but say it to someone else. Don't necessarily say it to them. I mean, when I hear
be to your friends or to your kid or anybody.
To look at your friend, and say something great about Terry, or look at your kids and say something great about Terry, or they overhear you on the phone. You do it intentionally for them to hear it because, oh my gosh, one of my pet peeves is when I see a couple and they're at a party and they're hanging out and somebody's sharing a story and the spouse comes up and goes, hey, that's not the way it happened. We didn't get there at 7. We got there at 7:30. He tells this story so dumb. She doesn't even get it. So I see the negative of that and how deflating
and
it is.
We've all experienced that too.
Yeah, and you feel like, why do we feel the need to do that? And so I think what we can do is the positive of that and say, I do this with my kids a lot. Your mom is the most beautiful woman I know. Or your mom is the hottest woman I know. Or your mom works so hard. What? That freaks after.
Yeah, that's a little TMI.
You know what? I don't think I'd say your mom's the hottest in front of my kids.
Yeah,
Good catch.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Hopefully.
But we'll leave it, even when we'll pray at night before we have dinner, I'll say, God, thank you for Nancy. Thank you for all she does for all of us. Thank you that she figures all this out. I don't know, she juggles everything. Thank you so much that she does that. And she'll say, oh, and thank you for Dad. He works hard to, pay for this and all that.
I do this all the time. Whenever I see one of my dogs at home, I'm like, you know what, Kitty? Your dad does such a good job at wiping your feet off.
Yeah. And you're totally serious, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I want him to keep wiping her feet off when she goes outside so I don't have to do it.
But here's the thing. This is kind of the trick. This is like the back. That's perfect, Gavin, because what is it? What's rewarded is repeated. And guys are easy. Like if I go, oh, she really likes it when I wipe off the dog's feet. Yeah. He will wipe those dog's feet until Jesus takes him home.
And then I get the dishes out and I'm like, dishes, Hudson does such a great job at putting you away. And I just do it all over the house all the time.
And you're being dead serious too.
Yeah.
I love this.
This is not an act.
This is the best application. What episode is this? Are we 8?
Yeah.
All the applications, I like this one the best. Because here's, especially for those of you who have a hard time, and I think Afton's kind of the guy at the table a little bit on this, like saying affirming words straight to somebody. Like for some people that we're saying, hey, say one positive thing about your spouse. This is one of those times.
That's when I say, Hudson, you did an adequate job at that. And he's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, because I never give him a direct compliment.
Oh, so when you got okay, so you were doing so good, Afton. You were doing so good until then. But,
okay.
No, I'm teasing. I think it is one of those things where if you're having a hard time, I've got a friend who'll do this. He's got a staff of people, and he'll say, hey, if you get a chance, tell so-and-so what a great job that they're doing. And at one time I was like, have you told them? Like, I get it. But at the same time, this is kind of baby step for people that have a hard time with affirmation. You know, say it to the plate. You know, say it to the dog's feet. That's strong, right?
Yeah.
Same thing, basically.
Same thing.
And then build from there, Afton, and maybe try saying something to another human in front of Hudson.
Okay,
You know,
maybe.
give that a shot too.
Maybe.
No, but it is so true. Like if Terry compliments me in front of our small group or something like that, boy, it's like a boss complimenting you in front of your team at work. It's just it carries so much more weight.
It carries a ton of weight to speak well about your spouse in front of someone else. It's just a powerful thing. And again, it's this whole idea of our marriage is mattering to other people. It's this way of affirming each other. People see that. Part of this, we're saying, why does my marriage matter to somebody else? Does it matter? Those are those moments that matter. When somebody sees, man, I love the way he talks about her. It's contagious. It makes us want to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's this one simple thing this week. It hits our marriages, and the fact that we're doing it in front of other people, maybe plates too, to Afton's point.
People or inanimate
dogs.
objects.
But when we do it in front of other people, it's planting something in them too. You know what I mean? A little bit of encouragement. Well,
Absolutely.
Well, Ted, thank you so much for leading us in this discussion this week, and thank you for joining us for the Married People Podcast. We hope that today's episode helped you realize that marriage is a little easier than you think. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Leave a review on iTunes while you're there or wherever you listen to your podcasts, because your review helps us make this podcast better. And finally, for more great resources to make your marriage better and to find the show notes for this episode, visit our website, marriedpeople.org. Then join us for next week's episode, where we'll be asking the question, can you support your spouse when you don't agree with them? That's going to be a great conversation. But until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Afton.
I'm Ted.
And thank you for listening.